A scattered mind is the enemy of happiness. Typically, we think about lack of focus, distraction, a scattered mind, as I call it, solely in terms of kind of lost productivity, right? But I believe that focus is a critical component of a good life. I mean, without it, we're just kind of lost. We're in this scattered, fragmented existence that will eventually degrade our mental health and well-being. Now, at the extreme end, there's people with severe deficits in attentional control, like people with ADHD. And they often find it harder to regulate emotions and to pursue long-term goals, to become deeply engaged in rewarding activities. And while those difficulties are most pronounced in individuals with a formal diagnosis, nobody can escape the fact that a lack of focus is really detrimental to human flourishing. Now, on the other hand, kind of on the positive side, a focused mind is not only more productive, but in some circumstances, it can provide an incredibly meaningful and fulfilling set of experiences. Just think about those moments when you feel completely absorbed by the task at hand, when time kind of disappears and when each action follows seamlessly from the last. You probably already know it, but that state is called flow, right? And people who report more frequent flow experiences tend to also report greater satisfaction with life in general and fewer symptoms of depression and anxiety. Flow, right, this sort of extreme state of focus arises when the task, when whatever you're doing is challenging, but not beyond your capacity, when you enjoy the activity, and when you can gauge moment to moment how well you're doing. Now, the flow state is uniquely valuable, of course, but you don't have to be in flow to experience the benefits of sustained attention. Whenever you pay attention, your brain amplifies the activity of some neurons and suppresses the activity of others. And this process itself seems to be enjoyable in its own right. Just simply paying attention to your environment or to the rhythms of your own body as you do in kind of meditation or mindfulness, that is associated with greater enjoyment compared to when you're distracted, when your mind is wandering. And unfortunately, in recent years, some surveys have suggested that Americans are more distracted and have a harder time paying attention, especially at work. So we're not reaping these benefits that just come from sustained attention. And there are multiple explanations, right? Think about work, think about the frequency of meetings and unavoidable interruptions that frequently face us. But many of us, I believe, are also just actively degrading our own attention. So there was a meta-analysis last year that had included 98,000 participants across 71 studies, and it found that people who consume more short-form videos on platforms like TikTok and YouTube Shorts, there's an association with that and poor attention, cognition, inhibitory control, and even some measures of mental health. Now, I will emphasize throughout this video that social media and digital technology, smartphones, these are all very useful, right? But they also present frequent opportunities for distraction, right? We've got notifications on our phones, our computers, our smartwatches, our smart glasses, right? And we just often react to these without even thinking. So whether we're talking about social media scrolling or this reflexive urge to just open a notification, I think that these habits can degrade our ability to pay attention. Let me talk a little bit more about that, but I think overall that makes it more difficult to gain value from our experiences. So let me draw an analogy. So imagine you are a bacterium, okay? You're a single cell organism. You find yourself in a small body of water. And in that water, there are nutrients, but they're kind of sparsely, unevenly distributed. If you happen to be in an area where nutrients are concentrated, bacteria will exploit that fact by ingesting those molecules, as you'd expect. They're eating the food essentially until it's all gone. But then what do? Right? So bacteria have this mechanism that's triggered when they no longer sense that there's nutrients around. And what they do is they basically, it's called tumble and run, I believe. And they essentially randomly pick a direction to start swimming in, and they swim forward. If there are nutrients around, they ingest them, right? And they continue moving in that same direction until there are no more nutrients. The mechanism is re-triggered, randomly pick a new direction, start swimming forward again. Kind of strategically switching between exploring its environment and exploiting the resources that are available to it in this really sort of logical way. Now, imagine, though, that this bacteria has a problem. Its mechanism, something's wrong with it, right? It never moves in any given direction for very long, even if there's tons of nutrients along that path. It just does the tumble, right? It just keeps switching its direction randomly. It might take up a couple molecules, but then move on. All right, so if the goal is maximizing nutrient intake, this strategy is pretty stupid, right? That's obvious, but that's basically what many of us do when we're working, and sometimes even when we're just engaging in leisure activities like watching TV, right? We stop what we're doing, we look at a notification, or we pull out our phone and we just start scrolling social feeds, right? Taking us away from really what's happening in front of us to, what's on the rectangle in our hand. But why do we do that, right? The answer is, of course, that we've trained our brains to behave this way. Now, we didn't evolve to use smartphones, but they're designed to tap into neurobiological systems, that have been around throughout our evolution. And these are involved in reward-based learning. And over time, we falsely learned that the effort involved in sustaining attention for long periods of time just isn't worth it, right? If you can get a psychological reward from something as simple as pulling that rectangle out of your pocket, staring at it, and just, swiping the screen, then your brain is going to implicitly begin to value this behavior as a shortcut to pleasure. And then we just repeat this cycle sometime later, right? We experience stress, we want to alleviate that stress, and our brain naturally picks the most habitual, lowest effort solution. And as we repeat that behavior, we change our brains in subtle ways. Whatever the exact effects are, habits always change the brain in some way, for better or worse. And with social media, unfortunately, it's often for the worse. But let me just pause, okay? I am not against social media, right? I'm not here to scold you. I'm not against short form video content, right? I've spent the better part of the last 5 years working on or with social media and video specifically as a central part of my career. I'm not somebody who's just like flat out against this, obviously. Probably seen some of my short form videos. But it's the excessive use of these platforms where people kind of begin to develop a dependence or an addiction or an obsession with them. And that begins to diminish attentional capacities, right? Positive content, whether it's short or long form, that improves your life in some way, that's a good thing, right? And I hope that my videos contribute to that. The problem comes when people develop, something like an addiction or dependence, obsession. Like I said, this excessive use of their phones and looking at social feeds all the time. It's like every moment becomes an excuse to pull out that rectangle and start scrolling again, right? You're that bacteria randomly moving around. Okay, again, neurons that fire together wire together. All right, so this habit is changing your brain. And it becomes especially problematic when you're watching like toxic, negative content, right? Rage bait makes us angrier. For many people, body shaming content lowers their self-esteem, right? Misinformation warps your understanding of reality. And, a lot of people watch too much news, in my opinion. And I think news sources are incentivized to focus on negative events, right? War, economic gloom. So frequently consuming that will probably make you more pessimistic about the world. Not saying do not watch the news. I'm just saying be aware, right? Now, overall, these platforms are designed to keep us scrolling, right? They're optimized to capture our attention, predict what will keep us on the platform, and feed us more of that. Now, that sounds frightening, okay? But don't forget, you're not powerless, right? We have agency. We have the ability to change our behavior in the face of new information. And if this habit is damaging your mind in some way, the rational response is not to just blame the system or complain about it, woe is me, but it's to change your habit, right? We can train our brains to crave that much greater reward that comes from deep, sustained, flow-like attention on a single task. And to do that, we have to be more selective with what we consume and more conscious of how we use our time and our technology, right? We need to probably often pay attention to fewer pieces of content for longer stretches of time. At least I find that very helpful. And, a simple way to do this is pick a piece of long-form content and watch it from the beginning all the way to the end. And you might be doing that right now. So congratulations. But also when it comes to notifications on your phone, a lot of people don't realize that you can set up modes like do not disturb mode during certain hours and set filters so that really really calls or apps can get through, but that most of it gets silenced, and then that automatically changes later in the day. So look into that if you haven't already. I have found that super useful for helping me to stay focused. Okay, now let me just back up because this might seem demanding, right? It seems like I'm asking you to give up those rapid fire dopamine hits that you get from scrolling. And I am, right? But that's because I believe that you will ultimately get so much more out of engaging deeply. Just think about the content, the stuff in your experience that has changed your life, has moved you and made a lasting positive change in your life. I mean, probably most of us aren't thinking of a TikTok video or a social media post. Right now, there's plenty of high quality short form content, but I think that it's safe to say that when most of us think of what is most impactful and important in our lives, it tends to be things like movies, books, essays, long form videos, podcasts, these kinds of long-form content that kind of reach in, require our attention, evoke emotions, and allow us to sort of get lost in it, even experience a flow state. And most of us want and need more of these kinds of experiences, right? Flow is deeply enjoyable. And as I mentioned, it seems to be important for our mental health and well-being. Sustained attention is typically more satisfying than distraction or mind wandering. Your mind will be clearer, your attention will be sharper, right? Your satisfaction with life may even be greater. Do not allow your mind to be fragmented anymore. Take action, reclaim your attention. And I think you'll notice one benefit almost immediately. This kind of deeper engagement with life just feels so much better. Okay, before I end this video, I just want to say thank you. I've been gone for a really long time, and I want to apologize for that absence. A couple years ago, I stepped away from YouTube to pursue a different career path. And frankly, that was largely because I needed to pay the bills. I needed to build more stability in my life. But throughout that time, I seriously missed this. I missed this community. I missed these videos, these topics, these conversations. And I've always intended to return. I just didn't think it would take quite this long. So over the past few months, I've spent a lot of time thinking carefully about what I want Sense of Mind to become. And I feel more certain about that vision than I have in a very long time. My promise to you is simple. I'm here for the long haul. Okay? Thank you for being here. And I want to say a special thank you to my Patreon supporters who stuck with me through my absence. To you, I am especially grateful. And my promise holds just as much. I am here for the long haul. So expect to see more from Sense of Mind. And thank you so much for watching this video. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the other videos I have. There will be more to come in the weeks to come. So thank you so much for being here. I'll catch you next time.